happily proven wrong. Okay, the value of safe water. So here's a graphic that gives some ideas about how much it costs to provide water various ways. So let's start all the way over at the right. You can have individuals in their houses collect some transparent soda bottles or water bottles, and they can put contaminated water in those bottles, and then they can set those bottles on the roof of their house, and they will get hit by sunlight, and the sunlight has UV light that ends up acting as a disinfectant. And so you can disinfect water that way. You can chlorinate the water in your house. You can have a little bottle of Clorox with a little dripper on the end. And so you can drip chlorine into the water that you're going to use in your household, and you can treat it that way. Or you can boil the water, or you could run it through a ceramic filter and have the water treated that way. And then getting into like more centralized approaches, you can buy water. And there's a couple different ways that you could buy water. One is you could buy bottled water. And another one is you could have a tanker truck come to your house and bring water to your house. Have any of you been anywhere where you've seen tanker trucks roving the streets providing water to homes? I see at least one of you has seen that. There are many, unfortunately, there are many cities on the planet where that is the dominant way of getting water to households in the city. And then the last one, the one that requires the least effort at the household level and that presumably costs the most, is centralized water treatment, safe water on tap. And this is a graphic made by someone else, and I want to just like push back a little bit on this notion that centralized water treatment is actually more expensive than vended water. And I want to push back on that because it is common for communities with poor water service to pay more for water than for the communities that have excellent service. Very, very common. And if you're buying vended water where a truck is bringing it to your house, or you are buying bottled water from a local store, you are paying far more for water than you would if you had safe water on tap coming to your house. I can talk about, like in my house, my water bill, combined water and sewer, is $30 a month. So I pay $1 per day for all the water coming into my house and then all the sewage going out of the house and being treated. If I were buying bottled water, I would easily exceed that price just with bottled water for myself. Having an excellent safe water on tap system is actually not so expensive. There's another thing to think about, and that is all this water, the water that people might use in their homes and run it through a filter or boil it or chlorinate it or disinfect it on their roof. Where did they get that water? I always joke that I know how to treat water, but I don't know how to make water. So that water had to come from somewhere, and either they had to walk out of the town or city to get it, or there was a pipe system in the city that was delivering them water, but it wasn't clean enough to drink. So that's interesting. If you're getting water to your house and then you're boiling it in your house because it's coming to your house dirty, that is what I call a cycle to failure or a spiral to failure. And I want to drive home a point about the relative cost of delivering water to your house versus the cost of treating the water. And we'll do this just by looking at Google Earth. So this is a town in Honduras. It's got about 3,000 people in it. It's Moroseli. And let's see, and Patrick has been there. And Moroseli has a water treatment plant, and you can see it under the little red dot there, except that you can't see it because it's covered up by the little red dot. So we zoom in a little bit and you still can barely see it, but it's right there. There's a tiny little building. That's the water treatment plant. okay? But then zoom back out again and look at this picture of the town and realize that every street in that town has a pipe running down the street, and there's pipes going into each house. And the question is, does it cost more to build the pipe network, that the distribution system that delivers water to each house, or does it cost more to build the water treatment plant? And just by looking at the scale of the problem, you should be getting, like, your engineering intuition should be kicking in, and you should be saying, wait a second, there are like miles and miles and miles of pipes. And then there's this one little building that's got stuff in it that's treating the water. And what I didn't show you is there's probably something like, I don't know, 15 kilometers of 6-inch galvanized iron pipe that's running from this town over to the river that they get their water from. So the point here is that that providing water on tap costs a whole lot. Treating it costs a little bit extra. I bet before you thought that treating it was the expensive thing, or maybe you never thought about it. But the inside is treating it is actually not very expensive, and that changes how you think about everything. Because if treating it isn't that expensive, then you have to think about this like you're running a business, and you want to make sure that your business is sustainable, and your business is, you are the water utility for a town. And you have an option. You can either provide your customers with river water that's untreated, or you can spend a little bit more and get a treatment plant, and then you can provide them with high quality drinking water. Which business model is going to be more successful? And to think about that, you need to think about how much people are willing to pay relative to how much it costs for you to provide that service. And the key here is that people are willing to pay a whole lot more once you go from dirty water to clean water than what they were from going from no water to dirty water. So people really want water in their houses at all costs, but they still are low. They don't want to pay a whole lot for dirty water. It's really hard to like get up your excitement about paying a water bill for muddy water. But once you have clean water, you're willing to pay a lot more. And there's also this whole sense of pride that comes of, hey, I live in a town where we have high quality water and my kids are feeling good. And I'm not like those other towns close by where they have crappy, dirty water coming out of their taps. So there's pride and there's willingness to pay for it. And that makes the entire water supply system so much more sustainable, because now the community, the water board or the water utility is able to charge more for their services than what they actually cost. So they can run a surplus, and then they can use that surplus to keep on improving their water supply system. And we have seen this multiple times in Honduras, where once a community gets a water treatment system, they take steps to improve other parts of their water treatment system, because now they're able to generate the revenue because people are willing to pay more for that water. So in this graphic, we start out with first dirty water here at the bottom, number one. It actually costs a good deal to provide dirty water, but people aren't willing to pay for it. So it's in that lower quadrant of this graph, and it's below the solid line at 45 degrees that represents they're paying enough to actually make it viable. And then if you add treatment, and you add treatment where it doesn't perform super well and it's expensive to run, then because it's expensive to run because maybe of energy costs, that's number two. So you've built a water treatment plant that is it costs a lot to make the water safe enough to drink. And so that might also be unsustainable. So the goal is to somehow design a system that gets you above that 45-degree line. And the way you do that is by making a water treatment system that is more cost effective, it's more efficient, and it has lower operating costs, and it still has high performance. And so by doing that, you can get above this people are willing to pay to support the plant line, and you get to success. So everything below the line is a spiral to failure. Everything above the line has a potential to succeed. And there's this spiral to failure. If you can't get enough money to support the infrastructure that you have, then as that infrastructure begins to fail, you don't have the ability to repair it. And so your service gets worse and worse and worse. If on the other hand, your system has run with enough income so that it's actually succeeding and can sustain itself with a little bit of extra, then you can keep on improving your service and the system is a success. Wow. I got excited about that because like this is a key insight. Communities are willing to pay for safe water in many, many cases, and it revolutionizes what happens in those communities. And we have to think about the economics of this. We have to make plants that are low cost, both to build and to maintain, and have low operating costs as well. So we got that. So the conclusions from that, there's a misperception that centralized water treatment systems are a bad idea. I didn't talk about this, but like I hear this, maybe I'm trying to figure out where I hear this. I think academia is one of the places where this idea comes out. There's this notion that centralized is just a bad thing. And I fight back and say, wait, are roads and bridges and hospitals and trains also a bad idea? Like, do we not like anything that's centralized? And I'd argue that as a civilization, there are many things that the only way to do it well is to do it centralized. It has to be done by a community, by a group of people working together. The capital cost of delivering water on tap exceeds the capital cost of treating the water by perhaps a factor of 10. So that's why adding the treatment on top of delivering the water ends up being a really good business model. And in order to be financially sustainable, drinking water suppliers must provide a service that is highly valued by their clients, by their customers.